things have changed a lot since the 1980s. For instance, there is now a framework of legal protection against discrimination that would have been hard to imagine actually when I was at university. I mean, when I was at school, in fact, for some of the time, just having gay sex was unlawful, and this continued in some other parts of the UK for quite a while afterwards. But actually having protection against most forms of discrimination for being lesbian or gay or bisexual or transgender just wasn't the case in the 1980s. And there was also much greater visibility within society. So, for instance, on TV, it's not unusual to find characters who are LGBT, and some of them are even black and minority ethnic characters, which is really good. So there has been a huge cultural shift. Within churches and other faith communities, there's also been a shift in views, though at leadership levels, people are still often very, very nervous about accepting that publicly. So what happens in the pews and what's regarded as not as fully acceptable and is supported is still sometimes frowned on at the highest levels, at least officially. But there has been a lot of progress in some ways. At the same time, I think it's dangerous to be complacent because, for instance, we've seen that surge of xenophobia across Europe, and in some cases that's been across Europe, parts of North America, other parts of the world, ethnic nationalism, very often linked with very prejudiced attitudes towards women and or LGBT people. So I think it would be dangerous to be too complacent and rest on our laurels and assume that it wouldn't happen here, that we don't need to mobilise, be active, find ways of talking to people who are perhaps moderately prejudiced but open to listening, finding some kinds of ways of touching on a shared humanity, reminding them that we are people like themselves, reminding them of the value of diversity, that actually everyone gains quite a lot from being in a community with people who have a range of different forms of identity, different ways of expressing themselves, different strengths. So I think it's important to recognise that perhaps that trend is happening here to some extent. I think there are some signs of it, that backlash, especially at times of instability, and this country might be entering a period of quite great instability, which can open the doors to a lot of prejudice. At a more low level, a lot of people still do experience quite a lot of prejudice and alienation, and grow up feeling isolated. So it's also important to have those spaces, have community support.